Look at this. This is where the crackdown stops being a border story and becomes a Washington survival story. Quick question, when the shield cracks, do you blame the shield or the hand holding it? Because right now, Kristi Noem isn't just taking heat. She's taking incoming meant for Trump. And the reason Democrats are circling her with the word impeachment isn't because they suddenly discovered oversight. It's because they think they found the pressure point that forces the whole operation into the light. Content reference, index .0. Noem has been the public face of the enforcement machine, standing at microphones, defending the posture, defending the tactics, attacking critics, and selling the country the same core promise: we're in control. Content reference, index 1. Minnesota shattered that promise. Operation Metro Surge was already controversial, but when Alex Preddy was killed during a federal operation in Minneapolis, the story didn't just go viral, it turned radioactive. Content reference, index 2. And once it turned radioactive, every person who helped build the narrative had a choice: de-escalate or double down. Noem doubled down. And now House Democrats are doing the most aggressive thing you can do to a cabinet secretary short of indicting them. They're saying fire her or we will try to impeach her. Content reference, index 3. That threat matters even if it never reaches a Senate conviction, because impeachment isn't only a verdict, it's a machine. It's subpoenas, it's sworn testimony, it's internal emails, it's depositions, it's timelines, it's chain of command. It's the kind of public legal pressure that turns a messy story into a permanent scandal. And that's exactly what terrifies the White House. Because the administration's survival strategy on Minnesota has been simple: flood the zone, change the subject, and keep moving. But you can't flood a courtroom. You can't tweet a subpoena into dust. You can't bully sworn testimony. Once Congress starts formalizing an impeachment push, the story stops being vibes and starts being receipts. Now, here's the twist that makes this even more dangerous for Trump. Reporting says Noem privately told associates that basically everything she's done at DHS was directed by Trump and Stephen Miller. Content reference, index for 4. Read that again. Directed. If that quote holds, it changes the political geometry. Because Democrats aren't just threatening to impeach the secretary for what happened under her watch. They're framing her as the conduit, meaning the people above her are the real target. That's the point. She's not just being punished. She's being used to climb the ladder. And Trump knows it. So you're going to see two different defenses running at the same time. Defense 1 is the public defense. Noem is strong. Noem is tough. Democrats are weak. Democrats are pro-crime. This is all political. Defense 2 is the internal defense. Keep Noem in place long enough to avoid validating the narrative that pressure works, but quietly adjust the optics so her presence doesn't poison the whole operation. That's why you're seeing constant repositioning. New spokespeople, new faces, coordination announcements, different surrogates cycling through television hits. The goal is to keep the enforcement posture intact while smearing the accountability campaign as theater. But impeachment threats aren't just theater. They create risk. And risk is where the GOP's business wing starts to panic. Because while Trump can rally a base with rage, he cannot rally bond markets with rage. Minnesota already produced a second storyline the White House didn't want: the economic story, the strikes, the blackouts, the workplace disruptions, the business unease about chaos spreading. And now add a Washington governance brawl on top of that. DHS funding fights, shutdown threats, impeachment headlines, and suddenly the question isn't, is the crackdown tough? The question is the government functional? Content reference, index 5. That is the environment where donors start calling. And when donors call, Republican senators start speaking in a new language. Not moral language, risk language. We respect enforcement, but we need stability. We can't have disorder. Those aren't policy statements. They're escape hatches. Here's what makes Noem uniquely vulnerable. Unlike many cabinet officials who can hide behind bureaucracy, Noem has been tied directly to the branding of the crackdown. It's personal, it's televised, it's emotional, which means the backlash is personal too. And Trump has been feeding that branding himself. Just last week, Trump publicly pressured DHS and ICE to show numbers, names, and faces to sell the crackdown, framing critics as agitators and demanding a propaganda push to regain public support. Content reference, Index 6. That isn't governance. That's narrative warfare. And if Trump is pushing DHS to create a public scoreboard, then Democrats pushing impeachment are doing the inverse. They're trying to force a public audit. Scoreboard versus audit. That's the fight. Now let's talk about Stephen Miller, because Miller is the power behind the curtain that everyone in Washington pretends isn't there until it becomes too obvious to ignore. Miller is widely described as the architect of the administration's aggressive immigration posture, and prior reporting has described Miller and Noem pressing ICE leadership for dramatically higher arrest numbers in tense internal meetings. Content reference, Index 7. So when Noem is quoted saying she was directed by Trump and Miller, it fits a pattern. It tells the story that DHS isn't just executing policy, it's executing a quota-driven political project. And that is exactly the kind of story Democrats want to put on a hearing schedule. Because if you can frame DHS as being run by political directives, numbers targets, optics demands, escalation incentives, then Minnesota stops being a tragic incident and becomes evidence of a system designed for confrontation. That's how impeachment arguments are built. Not on one tragedy, but on a narrative of abuse of power, obstruction, and disregard for oversight. And Democrats already have a foundation for that in the articles that have been introduced and discussed. Claims about blocking congressional oversight visits, directing enforcement tactics that violate rights, and abusing public trust. Content reference, Index 8. Again, you don't have to agree with every allegation to see the strategy. They are constructing a case file. Now let's talk about the escalation Democrats are pairing with impeachment, because this is where the squeeze turns real. They're not only threatening to impeach Noem. Senate Democrats have also floated blocking DHS funding as the government funding deadline approaches, turning Noem into a bargaining chip in a shutdown standoff. Content reference, Index 9. That kind of fight slows everything down. It drags enforcement into negotiations, turns operations into line items, and forces Republicans to explain why they're risking a shutdown to protect one cabinet official. Inside the White House, the panic isn't just political, it's operational. Reports described insiders worrying the administration's rapid, hyper-aggressive response after the Minneapolis shooting could undermine confidence in the investigation, because it looked like the narrative was being built before the facts were known. Content reference Index 10. Then came the meeting. Trump held a long White House meeting with Noem as the backlash intensified, and reporting noted Stephen Miller, usually the architect of the hardline posture, was conspicuously absent. Content reference, Index 11. If Miller is the engine of the crackdown, why isn't he in the room when they're trying to contain the fallout? Either Trump wanted a conversation without the loudest hardliner present, or Noem needed a direct lifeline because she could feel the ground moving under her feet. And that's where the numbers, names, and faces demand fits in. When Trump publicly pressures DHS and ICE to show a scoreboard of arrests and faces, that's not policy. That's narrative warfare. It's a loyalty test. Stop giving me process, give me villains. Content reference, Index 12. Democrats are responding with the opposite weapon, an audit. They already have a foundation in the impeachment articles and reporting that accuse Noem of blocking congressional oversight and violating public trust through enforcement practices. Content reference, Index 13. They can connect that to the broader pattern of hardline pressure, like prior reporting that Miller and Noem pushed for dramatically higher arrest numbers in tense internal meetings, arguing this wasn't careful enforcement, it was volume-driven political theater. Content reference, Index 14. And once you frame it that way, Minnesota stops being an incident and becomes evidence of a system built to escalate. That's why the White House is cornered. If Trump fires Noem, he teaches a dangerous lesson. Pressure works. If Trump keeps Noem, he invites a prolonged fight where subpoenas and sworn testimony can drag the directive chain into daylight. And if the reporting about her directed quote is accurate, then the entire drama collapses into one question that terrifies the Oval Office. Directed by whom? Because directed means there's a director. And if Congress can put that director on the screen, Noem isn't the story anymore. The hand holding the shield is. Here's the part that makes impeachment so lethal in a media war. It creates a paper war. Once committees start moving, the questions get specific. Who approved the talking points after Pretty's death? Who signed off on the posture in Minneapolis? Who ordered the agencies to prioritize optics, show the faces, instead of restraint? Content reference index your 15. And when questions get specific, people start protecting themselves. Career officials don't want to be the signature on the memo that becomes Exhibit A. Field supervisors don't want to be the voice on the radio tape that plays in a hearing. Comm staff don't want to be the author of the line that looks like a cover story. This is how an administration that runs on speed gets slowed by fear of accountability. That's why Trump's instinct will be to make fear point outward, not inward. He'll label impeachment a witch hunt. He'll frame oversight as sabotage. He'll demand Republicans' close ranks. He'll treat anyone who hesitates like an enemy because hesitation is contagious. But this is where Trump's coalition is fragile. The cultural base loves the fight. The institutional wing fears the precedent. And the business wing fears instability, especially when Minnesota already produced labor disruption and corporate unease. Content reference, an index 16. So you're going to see the same split play out in miniature around Noem. Some Republicans will defend her loudly because they're defending Trump. Others will defend the mission but go quiet on the person. And the quiet ones are the signal. When they stop using her name, it means they're preparing the exit. That's the clock Noem is on. Because in Trump's world, you are not kept for competence. You are kept for usefulness. The moment your face starts costing more than it protects, you become replaceable. And the reason this story keeps coming back to that one leaked line, "Everything I've done was directed," is because it turns the whole debate into a chain of command question. Content reference, just index 17. If Noem is the shield and she's telling people she didn't pick the battles, then impeachment isn't just a threat to her. It's a threat to the architecture behind her. So watch what happens next. Whether Democrats set a hearing date, whether Senate Democrats keep tying DHS money to Noem's fate, and whether the White House keeps escalating the propaganda push instead of calming the operation. Content reference, Chacher Index 18. Because the moment the administration chooses optics over restraint, it tells the country something chilling. They don't think they have to earn legitimacy. They think they can manufacture it. And Minnesota just proved manufacturing is harder when the evidence keeps showing up.